Good morning. My name is Breno Altman. Another edition of the 20 Minutes program is starting. On January 10th, Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro took office for his third term as head of the country from 2025 to 2031. The extreme right-wing opposition, led by Maria Corina Machado, refusing to recognize the electoral result endorsed by the Supreme Court, promised to mobilize its grassroots and inaugurate Edmundo González, the main candidate of the extreme right, last July 28. However, even with the support of international allies, the opposition plan failed. Only a few people responded to Maria Corina's call. On the contrary, it was the pro-Maduro rallies that took to the streets. Since January 10th, calm reigned in the country. The government began to focus on the challenges of the economy and, of course, the scenario that lies ahead with the government of U.S. President Donald Trump. To better understand this situation, one indispensable voice needs to be heard, that of President Nicolás Maduro. Our guest today in the first face-to-face interview of the 20 Minutes program.
How are you doing?
Thank you very much for accepting our invitation to talk to you.
Well, it is a pleasure to speak to the Brazilian people and Latin American people. Please. Good. Thank you very much.
Mr. President, I want to begin our interview with a question that is on the heads of many. Some foreign governments, like that of the United States, did not recognize your victory on July 28th. And they even announced that they recognize as President-elect Edmundo González. Do you believe that your inauguration on January 10th and the weakening of the far right will put an end to this issue?
The backsliding and the failure of the far right, fascist far right of Venezuela that have intoxicated and polluted over 20 years the far right and center right of all Latin America and the Caribbean is the expression that everything they did with them on social media, on media outlets, all operation around that nomination was an operation mounted by the U.S. government, the outgoing government, who profited in negotiations with the deceitful carrot diplomacy, and they didn't speak with seriousness, because all agreements we made were all violated and mocked by them. They have never complied with the agreements. They just use them to mount the destabilizing scenario on Venezuela again. We managed to consolidate after 2017 a peaceful process of political stability. In 2017-2018, we suffered a series of sanctions, a bombing of sanctions, and we've suffered a great economic damage. And then in 2019, the then officials, we have to recall John Bolton, Mike Pence, John Kelly, and Mike Pompeo, they designed the Guaidó project. And they convinced the then President Donald Trump that it was really easy to recognize, to recognize and to nominate a president named Guaidó, which nobody knows. And this would imply the taking over of Venezuela, a coup d'etat, and we know how to face it, to defeat it. And amid that, we have been able to recover society and economy. In that, amid that tension, the government of Joe Biden lost a golden opportunity to understand with us, to respect the agreement signed, and so he decided a Guaidó 2.0, part 2, who went very wrong. Because it was a failure too. So they know for a long time the cars, and so here in Venezuela they invested over $1.1 billion. The oligarchy, the technological oligarchy, the owners of social media were all turned against us. Facebook, Instagram, X, before Twitter, TikTok, and they all created a national and international situation that they believed it was infallible. And so we suffered on July 28th, which I denounced it immediately. On July 29th, the first cyber terrorist fascist coup of the modern history of Latin America and humanity, and we defeated them in 48 hours, and we have been consolidating victory. The country is at peace, institutionality is working out, the 5 polypowers functioning, and the economy is growing, recovering, and Venezuelans, the great majority of Venezuelans, 80% of Venezuelans reject this coup d'etat, and the 80% of Venezuelans wish its peace and are rejecting destabilization, and so heading towards future.
So what do you say to those that say that there was fraud on July 28th?
Well, it's not the first time. It's nothing new. We have been accused since the beginning of the Bolivarian Revolution to a revolution that is impossible to do because Venezuela built up an electoral system absolutely auditable. And so, tell me which place has been going through 15 auditing during, before, and after the electoral process, just in Venezuela. So our people knows, and the institutionality knows. The Supreme Court of Justice has been examining thoroughly, and so we have been demonstrated. We have demonstrated during the 31 elections over 25 years, and so we have demonstrated that populist advantage prevailed.
What happened on January 9th and 10th? A new coup attempt by the far right?
Well, much before. Because there are some things that we are underway and we cannot reveal, and I would like you to give you the updates in the future. But on November 10, we have been arrested over 200 mercenaries from 25 nationalities who came to place bombs and attacks, and so this hitmen. And we managed to dismantle groups who intended to create an arson in the country. Mostly in December, they wanted to damage Christmas for Venezuelans, and we have the best and long Christmas ever in history, because I just extended Christmas in October, November and December. I am Christian, despite my ancestors are Jewish. Maduro is Sephardi, and they were coming from Portugal, and they were expelled from Portugal in 1492, and from Spain with Capriles and all that people, and they were.
I'm asking us from Poland.
Oh, just like Netanyahu.
Well, no one is perfect.
And so we. In December, we have dismantled all violent attempts. And later, in January, they mounted a psychological operation in which they incorporated some former presidents, men and women, whom I called the sodomizing cartel, because they were made up of bandits, thieves, terrorists. All of them have been compromised in serious offenses within their countries. the list Andrés Pastrana, pedophile of the Al-Time band who died in the U.S. jails, and so they intended with them and with some governments as the coward government of Panama, who is going to deliver the Panama Canal because they are coward. And from there they launched Venezuela is going to turn into a commotion, into arson. And so they created all the psychological conditions to affect the Venezuelan people. But Venezuelan people are ironclad.
Em português se diz aqui não entra nem mosquito.
In Portuguese we say it doesn't enter mosquitoes.
So the Venezuelan people keep quiet, keep peace, keep at peace, full of faith. And so the visible leader of opposition that in Venezuela here we call the Sayona, the vengeful ghost from a legend. And so she believed and she overestimated herself of her leadership, and she is always asking for funds from the U.S., and so she summoned to great rallies in all the country, but they were not even 6,000 people. Maybe there were about 800 people in Caracas, and I gave the order to protect them. And so the national police and the National Guard protected those people, and it was public, it was known, and so they did their activity. At the international level, they took it as a failure, and here at the national level too, they felt those rallies as a failure because they intended on January 9 to spoil the swearing-in ceremony, and so they have a secret plan, a self-kidnap of the Sayona lady, the Sayona fascist criminal. It is a woman who is at the right of Bolsonaro, or the sons of Bolsonaro, who are worse than Bolsonaro. And so fortunately, the national police complied with the orders of protecting those people marching and protecting this person, this lady who has been protected toward her house. And so we managed to dismantle a very impressive campaign, because at around 3 p.m. of that day, it was evidently their failure and our victory. We managed to mobilize over 2 million people, the streets of Caracas, of the great Caracas, and of all cities nationwide, supporting the tranquility and peace of the country. So out of the blue, they started taking to the streets, and out of the blue, the social media outlets, they began to bend the truth and to say that Maria Corina Machado has been disappeared. And so then the president of Panama, the foreign minister, all began to call and to issue communiques, and all were written by the same pen. Maria Corina Machado has been disappeared, and she must appear, and the regime of Maduro, and 10 minutes later, the truth was revealed, saying that she has no issue, no problem. And so do you think that those who accuse us issued a communique or apologize for that? So they have been mounting a campaign, a coup d'etat, a coup of opinion to spoil the January 10th. Do you imagine that self-kidnap would have been sustained? What would they say in the north, in Europe, over there? Well, the criminal paramilitary Álvaro Uribe, the former president of Colombia, issued a post to call for invading Venezuela with the blue helmets. So you you conclude that they had plans of some ambushes. They weren't able to do it because we neutralized them, and so it was a perverse evil of self-kidnap, but they failed thanks to the military corps and the police corps of Venezuela. And so on January 10th, the swearing-in ceremony was taking place, and the people were there swearing in the presidential sash that they use, and those people at their homes sewed those presidential sashes, and a group of women of Caracas gave me the presidential sash that I am using now, and it was a blessed day. I am a Christian man, a man that commends my soul to the Lord, to Jesus Christ, and I said that this was a blessed day. And a presidential period began from that time.
The government of President Lula.
Do you accept me a coffee and water?
Yes, of course. The government of President Lula of my country also did not recognize the victory on July 28th, but sent a diplomatic delegation to your inauguration. Do you think the situation with Brazil can be overcome in the short term?
Well, there is no crisis with Brazil. There won't be ever be a crisis with Brazil. Simply, there are some differences between foreign ministries, differences with consulars here and there. And well, the obligation of President Lula and President Nicolás Maduro is to understand each other for our countries, and so to move on and to head toward the new geopolitical scenario, the situation of our Americas, and prioritize the relations between Brazil and Venezuela, peaceful, cooperative, and brotherhood relations of economic breakthrough. And if you know how many Brazilian investors have been arriving in Venezuela in energy, oil, tourism, and so we have been tracing that track, and if there is some difference in opinion, the only way out is to communicate, and so our foreign ministry has been in contact constantly with the Brazilian counterpart, and the only way is to understand each other for Latin America, for the Caribbean, and for peace and for the development of our countries.
President, despite that the left is covering 5 of the 6 biggest economies in Latin America, Brazil, Venezuela, Mexico, Colombia, and Chile, never before has that happened. The situation in the region seems to be stuck. What can be done about it? How is Venezuela moving? Mainly establishing prior relations with China and Russia. What can be done to overcome this regional stagnant position, despite that several of its governments are ruled by the left?
Well, it is one of the issues that I have been tackling on the swearing-in speech. We have to save the CELAC community, and there is an operation of the far-right wing of the Mileis, Noboas, and Bukelis, who are the Trojan horses within Latin America to implode us, to divide us, to self-destroy us. And so there is a whole operation to do with CELAC what they did with UNASUR, to dismantle it, to neutralize it, to destroy it. So those who believe in the union of Latin America and the Caribbean, we have to work on that task with new initiatives, with mutual cooperation, with active trade, with integration of currencies, of cultural integration, of scientific integration. There is a great issue of the artificial intelligence, which is the cutting-edge issue. Those who develop skills for artificial intelligence could be able to see the future of humanity. Those who regress that, they will have to pay the serious aftermaths in their societies. So it is the issue of the scientific development, of the interconnection between our peoples by sea, by land. We have to resume those scientific issues, and those who believe in union, we have to work on that act. And those who are Trojan horses, who are serving as slaves, as four men of slaves. Do you know that there were the four men of the Mr. Slavist? And so the slavist, the Lord took the four men, and so the four men was more criminal than the Lord. And so they have as four men the Bukele, the Noboa, and the Milei. They have it there. Conditioned and supported by social media, covering up all their offenses against their peoples, all their damages. And so that today it is the time that the left wing, the revolutionary sectors, the progressivism, the progressist in its diversity, let's row together toward the same goal of unity, of integration for the future of the continent. We can do it, and we will push forward to see good results. You spoke about Brazil. What is Brazil? Brazil is our superpower. And I feel very sad when I see far-right Brazilian politicians to propose that the future of Brazil has to become in a puppet, in a colony of the United States. Brazil has to be the superpower of freedom, independence, justice, social economic development alongside Mexico, which is another superpower. Alongside the recovered Argentina, with the ideas of Nestor, of Perón, and there we are. We modestly, we are building up our own economic, social, political model, and we aspire to be an intermediate power in the integral, in the comprehensive development of our country, with culture, with our natural resources, with education, and to grow consecutive alongside our neighboring countries.
Do you think that in the short term we can overcome, say, the differences that exist between the progressive countries of Latin America, when the main thing that had to do with this disagreement was the electoral process?
Well, I think that if respect and self-determination prevail as a precept, if the right of sovereignty prevail and the great necessity of facing the geopolitical menaces that our continent faces, I am completely sure that we are going to go on the right track to save the CELAC and to manage new dynamics of approachment, integration, and mutual growth.
What is, in your opinion, the role that BRICS can play in this? And what do you say of Brazil's decision to reject the integration of your country? Do you think that things will change for the next summit of the BRICS under the coordination of President Maduro?
Well, I invite you to a Venezuelan coffee.
You think that the Venezuelan coffee is better than the Brazilian one?
Well, taste it to see it. We have diversified the branches, the brands, and when the economic world arrived, we didn't have coffee on the streets, but today we have 600 new brands of coffee, and we are exporting coffee all over the world.
Cacao also is very good here.
And so cacao is very well. There are, and I have got that news for you for the cacao. We have a new species of cacao, and so we are heading forward and we are moving toward
About BRICS, the Brazilian decision, and the meeting that is upcoming. What are your expectations?
Well, I hope that things go through and that the path be clear in function of recognizing what it is a reality. Venezuela belongs to the BRICS. It is like what I said. Venezuela is not from South America. Venezuela is not from the Caribbean, or Venezuela is not from the Amazon. And so the far-right governments of Bolsonaro and Iván Duque denied the participation of Venezuela to the summits of the Amazon community. And they vetoed us. But we are Amazons, we are Caribbean, we are South American, Latin American, and we are from the BRICS. And so I hope, thanks God, that the path be cleared.
But what is your evaluation of the Brazilian veto for insisting on joining this organization? What happened?
Well, I think that we have to move on and head toward and clear the path, because Venezuela belongs to the BRICS from over 200 years. So those who thought and designed the BRICS are reading with capitalized B from Brazil, and that B, it is from Bolivar. So the one who dreamt of the BRICS is Bolivar. So we are from the BRICS.
President, what does it mean for Venezuela, the change of government in the United States with the incoming Donald Trump? Do you think that the new president will change its policies from its first mandate in 2017 to 2021, when he even threatened Venezuela with a military aggression?
You know what it implied for Venezuela, and for Venezuela it implied an opportunity to open the doors to a new kind of relations that it implies for Venezuela.
And for the world?
And for the world, it means big changes that are on the way, and for sure we will go through turmoils, hardships, but the acknowledgement that there is a new multipolar world that is going to prevail, because I wish that what President Trump offered, that peace prevailed, that the end of war and all issues be resolved through diplomacy and peace.
Do you think that these possibilities of negotiations can be better with the next coming with the government of Trump?
No one can affirm that today, but I can think that in the past is behind, and so we have to head toward the future, and let's see what the future expects from us. What I can tell you is that this Venezuela that you see here, this Venezuela is steadfast. It has a project of the nation. Our project, as Bolivar said, is America's. We have a project of the country. We have a very clear plan discussed with our people, which is the Homeland Plan for 2025-2031. We have a popular power. We have a civic military police fusion, and we are victorious today. We are victorious. We are on the best conditions to go well in any scenario. We have been developed a strategic thought, the legacy of our commander Chavez, who has a great capacity of a very strategic thought, and so we were his students, and President Lula know, because we met when I was a foreign minister, and so he knew about the interesting debates on the world, and Chavez was the one who saw that the BRICS was our route. in 2016, 2017. He even wrote it for the 2012 program, the first plan of the homeland. We have to go to the BRICS, so we are just planning humbly, with lots of realism, with lots of common sense, lots of patriotism, with lots of revolutionary commitment, because we are revolutionary. Revolutionary, we believe in Bolivar, in Christ, because the great revolutionary is our Lord Jesus Christ and our liberator Bolivar. And the great revolutionary of the 21st century is Hugo Chavez. So we are ready for all scenarios, and that Venezuela prevail peace, stability, sovereignty, and
And do you think that Donald Trump is going to respect Venezuela's sovereignty?
You cannot expect that others respect you, but you have to make yourself respect. And I tell the people always thought of José Gervasio Artigas. José Gervasio Artigas, one of the great liberators of South America, a steadfast and brave man. And we always repeat it. Let's not expect anything but ourselves. No one over there. So plan with your strength, with your capacity, what you can manage, what you can achieve, and work with that. That we cannot expect any help but from ourselves. And then we will see. So help yourself and work with your own efforts, said Ho Chi Minh, the great Ho Chi Minh. So work with your own feet, think with your own mind, and build with your own hands. So the day with that in our America, do not expect anything from outside, but build everything with their own efforts. That day will come and will flourish independence with prosperity, and so we will be respected. So everyone has to make respect with independence, patriotism, and with reasons.
President, I have some question about the internal situation of Venezuela. After a strong fall of the GDP in 2014 to 2021, with hyperinflation, Venezuela has grown again in the last 3 years, and the price hikes have stopped. What changes allow for this result?
Well, first you have to tell the truth. First you have to tell that criminal sanctions against the oil industry and economy of Venezuela made us lose the 59% of our incomes, and so we have decreased a lot with our incomes due to 99% of our incomes. That has a catastrophic impact. Venezuela imported 80% of all the products we consumed. We didn't produce anything. What do we need? Potatoes, beans, rice. Let's purchase everything outside. And so that's what is called the Dutch disease. Someone called it the dependent capitalism. The capitalism-dependent model. We didn't have industrialization processes as in Brazil, but here there emerged a parasitory bargainsay from the dollar, and so criminal sanctions led us to a non-returning point. But we have a plan, and with a very crystal clear plan, we protect first the people. It's the food of people. What it means, clan? Well, the committees of supply and production, local supplies and production. I took it from El Salvador. We make up several committees, the top priority was to supply the people, to protect the food. The second thing is to protect all missions in housing, education, among others, and the social protection. We made it. And then an economic plan, we defined the development engines, and we prioritize the production of food. With the macroeconomic conditions, we move forward, and it is clear that we have 3/4 of growing. The country is supplied 100%, and 80% of the produce on supermarkets are out of national production. We have managed to defeat inflation. We arrived to 300,000 inflation. We arrived at some point in the past. So we have to take into account sanctions, which were missiles directed against our economy, and we have recovered with our own efforts, with our own plan, with our own resources, without depending on anyone, and without crying. You haven't seen me crying, but with our own efforts, we have managed to unite all the entrepreneurs. We have managed to boost entrepreneurs, small entrepreneurs, big micro entrepreneurs, and we have managed to unite all productive forces, and I can tell you that we are on the condition to continue growing. In 2024, we have a 9% of growth of the GDP, and the CIPAL said that it is the country with the highest rate of economic growth in Latin America. So we have, with our own efforts, we are going to consolidate it, and we are on the conditions for these forthcoming years to go to a prosperity stage in function to recover the social rights of the people, which are being postponed, and they need some special investment.
There are left sectors that criticize you for adopting measures, liberal measures. How do you answer to those criticisms?
Well, I have to hear the criticism, because after an economic war that is sustained, of a blockade that is there in force, we have to face that. If you have produced or not produced, and a lot of people launched some criticism, and I studied them all, and if there is some good reason to any criticism, I just made it right. But we have been very careful of building up our own economic plan, and I can tell you that, as I have said it, the economic thought of ours is ours, and we don't apply any IMF policy or anything. We have nothing to do with the neoliberalism of Milei or the IMF doctrine. So everything that we do here is with a great macro consensus amid the most frightened economic war of all sanctions that made us lose 99% of our incomes, but we have built up with our own thoughts, and let's not So we must.
Mr. President, your economic program continues to be socialism of the 21st century, as it's always been the flag of Chavez. The virtue of special economic zones and other favorable measures for the participation of the private sector that creates a new conception of the development. Can private entrepreneurs invest in these projects.
Our project of society is socialism for the 21st century. So it means that we are building up. And so there is no manual. Those who have a manual for constructing the socialism, give it to me. There is no such a thing. And so someone asked Fidel, and Fidel asked that the worst mistake he made was to think that someone knew how to build this socialism. So socialism is about to build up based on values, principles, a new civilization, a new modernity, and we are just claiming for a new society model based on cooperation, on disappearing hegemonic empires, and in the construction of sovereign economic bases based on a project we have. That project assets and seeks and needs private investments, seeks assets and needs international investments, because we have some regulations at the Constitution, very clear ones. For example, for a U.S. investor in oil, it is cheaper and more profitable to invest in Venezuela than in the United States. A small datum for you to take note. For example, for a Brazilian investor, those who want to guarantee oil and gas for the next 30 years, it is more profitable to invest in Venezuela, because here we have the whole oil and gas that Brazil needs. So welcome the special economic areas emerge as part of a study that we have been doing for over 15 years since Commander Chavez, when we began those studies, examining the experience of municipalities, and then I visited other municipalities recently, and it is very interesting, and we have made up 5 special economic areas that have been launched at a good pace, and it is a tremendous opportunity for the development of the exporting economy and of the economy that catches currencies, because we have to liberate the country of oil, that oil developed, but we cannot depend on the oil incomes as it was 120 years ago. But we have the sources for currencies and the money that we need for the stabilization of our economy, of the investments that we need. We have a very clear model. And Venezuela seeks and continues catching important investments, and I announced it on January 10th. We have signed agreements for $52 million of investments in the 13 models of the Venezuelan development in oil, gas, petrochemical, iron, aluminum, gold, tourism, pharmaceutical industry, the production of food, $150 million of investments. And so at a midterm, we will have new sources of wealth and prosperity, and we are on the right side of history, on the right path, building up our own model without any IMF models or impositions from the empire.
Is there no risk with those special economic zones that the state loses the control of the economy, as it happens in capitalist countries?
The state is the constitution. The state is the government ruling the economy. The state is the government ruling the state with the laws, and it is guaranteed by constitution and law at the hands of the state. The state is catching the resources, the wealth, and we are building a more democratic state. We want a solid state for govern, for guarantee peace, for guarantee the social economic development, and to guarantee the growth of our economy and of all sectors.
Those foreign investors can have the majority in those companies, the majority of the stocks in those areas.
Yes, in the economic special areas, which have their investments, and they contribute with generating wealth and exports and taxes.
Mr. President, in your last speeches, you have repeated that a paramount project of your third government is to carry out the constitutional reform. Those that oppose, both in and outside, believe that put an end to the democracy. In the end, what do you pretend with that reform?
So the far-right opposition cannot say that I'll end the democracy, because they said that there is none. So it is a contradiction. The constitutional reform, it is a big national dialogue. It is a big debate. In Venezuela, we cannot reform a word of the Constitution without debating with the people and without a referendum. It is impossible.
It is mandated by the Constitution.
Yes, it is compulsory. The sovereignty of the people cannot be changed, and the constituency power is in the people. So the people is the only one who changes the Constitution.
Parliament cannot reform the Constitution. It can only do it the people.
So the state can reform it, but with a referendum. That is a democratic right that we established in the 1999. I was there, participated there, and all that debate is going to be with the people, seeking for consensus for the big changes that the society and the state needs and the economy needs. This Venezuela is a different Venezuela, different from the 1999, from the 2005, from the 2015, from the 2020. This is a Venezuela that is heading toward the 21st century. Let's design the 21st century on the basis of our strengths. And I have claimed the broadening of democracy, the real social direct democracy of the people, to empower the people forever, and to overcome the democracy of elites, of the minorities, of those that coming from the helicopters and do not walk by the people.
Is that an overcoming of the liberal democracy?
It is just to overcome it is the construction of a Bolivarian democracy, of direct democracy, which have a lot of experiences. We are not making up the water, because there is a direct democracy here in Venezuela, but we are going to visualize the state, and in second place, it has to do with the values of society. There is a great debate of the values that the society is going to have in the future. The model of the Western model has been out, and so the postmodernity has been running out, and so what is emerging is fascism, the ultra-conservatism, and the imperial colonial ideas of humanity. And what is our idea in the Global South? What is the model of our society? We are just stating that what would be the model that the people want. So let's listen, let's write about that. And thirdly, the third issue is the basis of our new economy, which I have assured that a diversified, self-sustained, sovereign and productive economy that sets the basis
la ruptura de la dependencia
to disrupt from the oil rent, and we have been moving forward that we have been having consensuses, and these are the three axes that as of February 15, we will be launching to the debate that will unite us even more and will consolidate that climax of stability that we have.
So, what is commune democracy? What is this? Can you explain so that Brazilians can understand what you're trying to do?
Well, it is the neighboring democracy with the organization that the people has. In Venezuela, we have 49,000 communal councils that organize the neighbors that you live in. And a communal council can be made up of 200 to 250 families, and there they work in the governorate and in the attention of their problems they have. Of those 49,000 communal councils, they have been grouped in communal circuits. What is a communal circuit? The grouping of those districts. And we have over 5,000 communal circuits, and so communities are grouping. And as of this year, we have been holding 4 consultations for people to elect their communal projects, and the state allocate the money for their construction. So we are proposing that the new democracy has the basis, the fundamental basis on the development and empowerment, participation and permanent decision of neighbors in their communal council and in their communal circuit. So we are broadening the basis of the real democracy of the citizens' democracy, because democracy is the people of the power of the people. The oligarchy hasn't, the liberal oligarchy hasn't achieved that, because they have achieved, and even more with social media, because they are imposing the presidential nominees who imposed Milei in Argentina. WhatsApp, TikTok, Instagram, that arrive to millions, and so creating states of opinions and manipulating emotions. And so a monster like Milei, a fascist, a Nazi like Milei, and so like that, and so to combat that false democracy and to the backsliding of postmodernity, we respond with an own project, with a civilized project, and all intellectuals, all left-wing intellectuals, and all political forces of humanity, we have to move forward with proposals and with the practices of this.
But the presidential elections are going to continue to exist.
Yes, these are constitutional rights necessary, and it's going to continue existing, the presidential permanent election. But what it changes is the structure of the government, which has to respond directly to communities, and governorates and mayorships, mayor offices, and legislative powers will continue to exist. And the structure is a democratic structure. We have 5 powers. The commander-in-chief of Bolivarian Armed Forces. In the States, there is a governor, which have a legislative council, and there is a mayor office elected by the people, and it's municipalities. And so the structure that we have been building is the structure of the public power, and so we are striving to give them more power, more political power, constitutional power to popular power.
President, do you recognize the criticism of those against you, that there are political prisoners in Venezuela?
There are no criticism. We have to differentiate between criticism to allegations. These are allegations.
¿Cómo se puede llamar
And how can we call
Brasil
them in Brazil
a alguien que
to
intente matar al
someone
presidente?
who intends
Preso
to
político.
give a coup d'etat to assassinate the
In
president?
Brazil, that happened. There were some that tried to kill the
Dios
president.
me ha protegido.
Those who
puesto su
try
mano
to
para
assassinate
salvarme.
me, God has protected me.
Son presos políticos.
Those are
Están convictos y
political
confesan.
prisoners.
¿Cómo se puede llamar a los que atacan
They are
un
convicted
cuartel
and
militar?
confessed.
Con bombas.
Who can we call those who
madrugada.
attack a
¿Cómo se puede
military
llamar a los que
barrack?
destruyen
Those who
una unidad de
destroyed
salud, una escuela,
a health
una
facility, a school, a
¿Cómo se
university?
pueden llamar a los que intentan
Who-
derrocar un gobierno constitucional por la vía de la
How
fuerza?
can we call
¿Cómo se
those
puede
who
llamar
try
a los que llaman por las redes
to
sociales
defeat a
a matar, a
government
quemar
by
seres
force?
humanos?
And
¿Cómo se puede llamar a los que
what
mataron
can
a
we call
27
to
personas
those
entre el
who
29 y
killed
30 de
27
julio?
people on July
Salva
29 to
sangre, porque eran
30
chavistas o parecían
because
chavistas.
they seem chavistas
¿Cómo se puede llamar
or they were
al que buscó
chavistas?
a una dirigente
What
nuestra
can we call
de
to
un centro
those who
electoral?
sought a leader of us and killed her in front of her family? But the world manipulates the truth and they call them political prisoners. But here there is a prosecutor's office, and the public prosecutor's office has been acting.
La ley permite
And in the cases of minor crimes, the law allows, and we have released over 600 people in violent acts, but in other cases they have been processed for attempting to make us a coup d'etat, to assassinate me, and to destroy health and education facilities and military facilities. So it cannot be a double standard model, because in some countries this is terrorism, but in Venezuela,
violación constitucional.
in other
golpismo.
countries
Pero
it
en Venezuela no.
is a
En Venezuela
violation
se
of
permite.
the state, but here in
una
Venezuela they cannot. We have to allow it. But these are double standard, and in Venezuela there is justice, and those allegations have been fallen for their lies, as they are.
Una reivindicación histórica sobre Esequibo.
President, you say a historic reivindication regarding Essequibo. So I have a direct question. Does Venezuela intend to recover the Essequibo using military force?
Venezuela tiene el derecho
Not
internacional
ever,
a su
because
favor
Venezuela has the international right in its favor, and so the
en casi 200
Venezuela
años
has
el derecho
looked
internacional.
for
frente
all
primero a la amenaza del
laws
Imperio
for all
Británico
cases
de invadir
of
el
the
país
international right, and
cuando
so
constituyeron la
in the
colonia
case of
de la Guyana
the
Británica.
United
Y
Kingdom,
luego frente
who
a la traición y la puñalada que nos
who
metió el Imperio estadounidense
structured the colony of
y a sus
the
amenazas
Guyana,
ahora con
and
la
in
ExxonMobil.
and with all the
Venezuela
threats
tiene
with the
el Acuerdo de
ExxonMobil,
Ginebra,
Venezuela
firmado en
has the
1966
Geneva
y
Agreement
depositado en la
signed
ONU,
in 1966,
reconocen nuestro
which
derecho
is at the
al
United
reclamo
States,
histórico.
at the United
Tenemos
Nations,
documentos históricos,
and
porque la Guayana Esequiba
recognized at the
no la
United
regaló
Nations,
nadie.
and we have
La Guayana
our
Esequiba
historical
forma
rights,
parte
but because our
Bolívar,
Essequibo,
una herencia
no
de
one
Formó parte
gives
desde
us,
la
because
definición
this was a
de
legacy from
los
Bolivar.
límites de la
It was
entonces
part of
Capitanía
the
General de
boundaries of
Venezuela,
the
en
Captain
1777
General
por
of
parte del entonces Imperio Español.
Venezuela by the
luego,
Spanish
con la
Empire,
liberación
and
de lo
then
que
with
fue
the
Venezuela,
liberation
la
of the
Colombia,
then Venezuela,
recuerda que
the
Bolívar
Great Colombia. Let's
formó la
remember
Gran
that Bolivar
Lo que hoy es Venezuela,
made the
Colombia,
Great
Panamá y
Colombia,
Ecuador.
what it is,
Y luego Bolívar fue el
Venezuela,
libertador
Panama,
de
and
Perú y
Ecuador,
fundador de Bolivia.
and then Bolivar
Cuando
was
se hizo el
founder
mapa
of
de la
Peru
Gran
and
Colombia,
founder of Bolivia, and when the
luego el
map of
mapa
the
de
Great
Venezuela,
Colombia
cuando
was
se separó la Gran
was
Colombia,
created, and then
están los
when
documentos
the
del
Great Colombia was
reconocimiento
separated, we
La
have
Guayana
the
Esequiba
documents, the
fue,
international
es y será
acknowledgement.
de Venezuela.
The
Y la
Great
vamos a recuperar.
Essequibo
La vamos
is
a recuperar por la
was,
vía
is,
de la verdad,
and will be of Venezuela, and we
del
will
derecho internacional,
recover it
porque
by the international
tenemos
right,
la razón
because
histórica
we have the historical
tierra
reason,
heredamos
and
de los
that
libertadores
land
a
was
sangre
inherited from our liberators.
President, is it true that you pretend to liberate Puerto Rico from U.S. domination?
Eso me han dicho.
I've been told this.
Bueno, tú eres el comandante.
Well, you are the commander.
Mira, vale.
Look, I was in that moment remembering Bolivar. Bolivar made a project of liberating Cuba and Puerto Rico. For Cuba, he nominated José Antonio Báez, liberator of Carabobos, and José Antonio Sucre, the great marshal of Ayacucho, the great liberator of South America, José Antonio Sucre. And so he made the calculations, how many ships, how many trucks, how many soldiers for liberating Puerto Rico and Cuba. I was just reflecting about that at the Anti-Fascist Congress, and I just greeted you and to nominate you commander of the Brazilian troops, and then there was a whole controversy about that statement, but Puerto Rico doesn't need to be liberated. Puerto Rico will be liberated by the beautiful, joyful people of Puerto Rico, inheritors of the great combatants which we will have. Well, Puerto Rico will find their way out. Look that in CELAC, Venezuela proposed several years ago the CELAC community, 33 countries, we are, there are 34 seats which was approved for Puerto Rico when Puerto Rico be freed and independent and happy.
President, how you interpret the escalation of the U.S. and his allies in regions like the Middle East, especially in the Palestine? With the new presidency in the U.S., what could change in that scenario so dangerous that the world is experiencing?
Well, Pope Francis said that the world is at the brink of a world war, that criminal essay, that criminal genocide against Palestine, the great ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people, but the Palestinian people have resisted, but they are proud of being Palestinians cannot be destroyed, and so we hope that this ceasefire agreement in Gaza be the prelude of peace in there, and that their independence and their independence be respected, and we hope for a ceasefire agreement in Ukraine arrived, and of course, from the military war, we will pass to the cognitive communicational war, because it is sure that the European and US elites are trying to curb the changes of the world, and that is not possible anymore, because there is another world. There is a different world now, and though people won't allow their hegemony, and so under all circumstances we advocate for peace.
Here in Venezuela, you have promoted a series of activities to promote the creation of an anti-fascist movement. Other people talk about this, but they consider that your government formed part of the dictatorships of the world. So what would you say to all the enemies and allies in the anti-fascist struggle?
The one who thinks that Venezuela is under a dictatorship, I invite him or her to come here and walk through the neighborhoods and speak to the people, because Venezuela is a country in which the people is empowered for the debate of ideas and stability and peace. And so, coming out of those intimidating campaigns that are being made to justify the extreme scenarios of coup d'etats, invasions that are not going to take place, I just made a call to those who are concerned for the emergence of Nazis currents, and so that affair we have been tackling here in Venezuela with a lot of strength, and we advocate for a great front against fascism of the brace of the world. And we do not intend that the first issue be to recognize the Bolivarian Revolution, please. The first issue is to save humanity from a Nazi tragedy, from a fascist tragedy. That fascism that has emerged right now is very different from the one before, but it has the same greetings, the same thoughts. Segregationist, racist. Today, they do not chase Jewish, they chase migrants from Europe. And why there are migrants in Europe? Because why do all Africa goes to Europe? Because of the plundering and the slavery of Africa imposed by Europe. If they have if they have humanity, they would invest in economic development in Africa. But the only ones who are investing in Africa for the development of that continent, for the hope of that continent, are China and Russia. I put the example of Africa and Europe, but we could provide the example of Latin America. And I think that it has been a happy idea, this anti-fascist Congress, and we have assumed the motto of Ho Chi Minh, that is, unite all those that can be united against fascism. Let's unite beyond all the circumstantial differences. It is worth that uniting against fascism to avoid the tragedy.
President, one final question as we're reaching the end of this interview. You know, as a personal curiosity, the main religion in my country, all of a sudden in Venezuela, that used to be the easiest rival in football for our nation, became stronger. It even managed to defeat Brazil in a football game. How did Venezuelan football improve so fast?
I think that in general, it is the massive participation of sport, especially football. There are the opening of sport schools. Let me give you an example.
Because here the main event continues to be baseball.
Well, they are even. I am going to tell you. When I was 10 years in 1972, I think that in 1972, in that time, the Mr. Clemente, father of Pelusa, a friend of mine who died recently, there when I was raised, he was Uruguayan, a great Uruguayan footballer, Ortega, and so he took us to play football in a yard of a school of San Ignacio Noyola. There isn't anymore because there is a supermarket now. But I wasn't good at football. I just run enough.
Who was your idol in football?
Pelé, Garrincha, the great ones of the era, the Brazilians. Yes, of course. The World Cup in Mexico, in which Brazilians won over Italy in Mexico, and so we saw it here in Venezuela on TV, and it must be the reason why I liked football. I wanted to play football because I just could play a serious football when that mister took us to that yard. And one day my dad told me, where are you gonna play football? And so those...
You don't have like the type of a football player. What is your height?
Well, I am around 7, 8 feet tall, and so my dad told me you will play baseball. I always liked football, but I didn't have the conditions for it. And then the national selection, they offered me a contract to play in the United States, but I dedicated myself to the revolution, to social struggles, and then football began to emerge, to search, and clubs were broadening, schools were broadening, and that massive schools, the results of those massive results were these good players. Venezuela is just at the brink of getting to the World Cup, to get to a big bang and to get great players, and someday to compete with the great players of Brazil and Argentina. And so this is the watch that Diego Armando Maradona gave me at the closure of the 2019 campaign. They are great players. We were born and raised by supporting Brazil in the 1974, 1975, 1978, 82, 86, then Mario, Falcao, Dirceu, there was a player named Dirceu, and Socrates, who was a physician. I just played like Socrates. My style was that of Socrates, fancy. I put the ball there, and if they made a mistake, I just scored. And so we are great fans of Brazil. We continue being great fans of Brazil, and now we have a strength for fighting for our national team with faith.
President, a question that I want you to answer as a football fan and not as a politician. Diego Maradona or Pelé?
Well, in the 1970s and in the 1960s, Pelé, and in the 1980s, 1990s, Maradona. At the end, they are both together at heaven. I think that they are even.
President Maduro, I want to thank you very much for your time and for the opportunity that you have given us to be here. And before saying goodbye, two small questions I always ask to our interviews. The first, what book would you like to suggest to our viewers? Movies or TV series?
Look, last night Celia and I began to read, to see the 100 years of loneliness, and the first chapters I liked, but I have to wait. And then I could recommend the series Bolivar of Netflix, made by Colombians. At the beginning, I have some fear because it was made by Caracol, the enemies of Venezuela. It is a Colombian drug dealer company, but they made the Bolivar series, but it was very good. And about books, I just recommend a book, a Colombian writer wrote by a Colombian writer who has dedicated to study Bolivar, Indalecio. Bolivarism and Monroeism, wrote by
siglo pasado, siglo XX,
written by Indalecio,
de la doctrina de Bolívar,
which is a comparison between Bolivar's doctrine and Monroe's doctrine. I think that it is enforced,
de Colombia,
and there are more facts about the conservatism thought.
de Bolívar,
And when people see the ideals and thoughts of Bolivar, they all see everything clear. And I think that it is one of the enlightening books of Latin America and the Caribbean. And today,
política mundial.
they spoke about the conflicts today.
President Nicolás Maduro, thank you very much for this interview for our Brazilian viewers. All these very helpful words to be better known the situation in Venezuela.
Muito obrigado.
Thank you very much.
Brasil.
Thank you very much. Long live Brazil.